Hi everyone, I'm Allie with the Potomac Bead Company, and I'm going to show you today how to do this twisted wire wrapped bangle, as well as the S hook with the embellishment to match. The twisted wire is a wire that is a Beadalon product. For this I'm using 20 gauge twisted wire, and I'm using it in the non-tarnished brass color. That's going to be used around my amethyst rondelles. They're a 5x8 faceted rondelle. And my base of my wire is going to be 18 gauge round wire. In addition to my 2 gauges of wire, I'm going to be using a Sharpie marker to help me with my clasp. I'm using a wire cutters, a needle nose pliers, whether or not you're using straight needle nose or bent needle nose, that's up to you. And I'm also going to be using a round nose pliers as well. So I have those 3 pliers handy, my Sharpie marker, my wire, and then you're going to be using your hands a lot to hold that wire and to turn it as you go. So we'll get ready to start on this bangle bracelet. So I've started out by cutting my 18 gauge wire, and I've cut right about 10 inches of my 18 gauge. I'm going to make the clasp at the very end so that way I can decide if I want to make it large or small depending on how much more room I need for my bangle. But to start, I need the beads to be able to stop on the wire. So to stop the beads, what I want to do is I want to grab my needle nose pliers, and I want to have my wire coming up through the very end of those. And my round nose pliers, I'm just going to turn and make a nice loop there, and I'm going to center that eye pin by going back into my round nose pliers and just doing a little turn there. I can then take my needle nose and just kind of flatten out from what the round nose created. And then I'm going to get ready to slide on my beads. So I'm going to slide on my first of my beads, and then we'll get ready to cut a piece of my twisted wire as well. So I just cut 20 inches of my twisted wire, and I'm going to put my first of my amethyst beads onto my 18 gauge round. So the 18 gauge round is going to go right nicely with this look, and I have that on my 18 gauge non-tarnished brass. I'm going to pick up my twisted wire, and I'm going to hold it so that it's perpendicular to my 18 gauge. I'm holding just that it has a little bit of tail, so I have something to hold on to. I'm going to take these 20 inches, and I'm going to wrap just 1, 2 wraps around my 18 gauge wire. Once I have those 2 wraps around, I'm going to go in and I'm going to cut off the extra little piece that's there. I'm going to push that 20 gauge up next to my amethyst bead, and I'm going to get ready and slide on a couple more of my amethyst. It's up to you if you want to put them all on at once and do a little turn at the bottom of your wire, you can do that. I'm just going to put on about 5 or 6 beads here. And what I'm going to be doing is kind of placing them and moving them into place as I work with my bracelet. So I'm going to move those 4 out of the way, and I'm going to wrap over the top of the amethyst beads. I'm going to take the wire over the top. You can see the twisted wire is rather springy, but it's going to go over the top of the next amethyst bead. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to wrap it 2 times, just like I did, right around that 18 gauge wire. Now this bracelet, to look nice, really kind of consistency is the key. So I want 2 full turns. And then I'm going to come across the top, slide my next bead in place, and I'm going to hold the wire over top of the bead here. And again, get ready to do more of my turns. So again, 2 complete full turns of my twisted wire. Slide my next amethyst bead in place. And get that wire right over the top again. This is one of those projects that you really are going to hold with your hands more than anything. You can see that wire's kind of going crazy there. But you do want it nice and tight, so that way you get your nice consistent pattern of the wire going over top of those rondelles. I'm going to try to make it that it's going over the top at the same place every time that I'm using it. Another bead goes up into place. And the wire again is going to come up right parallel. I'm going to hold the wire right on top of my rondelle or your round bead or whichever style you're doing. I'm going to coil that twisted wire right over it. The longer you get into making this bracelet, the easier it is because you actually have less wire that you're fighting with. And you don't have to worry too much about getting another bead in place there. Another one goes on, and I'm going to wrap again 2 complete times around. I'm going to continue doing this wrap and wrapping them 2 times around and positioning my amethyst right in place. So I've gone the whole way around, making sure to be as consistent as possible with getting those 2 wraps and then the twisted wire right over the top of the bracelet. And I'm coming to the end here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to clip the rest of the twisted wire. So I'm going to clip that there so that it kind of matches on the other side. I'm going to slide on one of my amethyst beads. And then here on this side, I'm going to mimic the other side using my round nose pliers. And turn the wire to the side. That's going to tighten up the wires too as I'm working with them. Kind of turning it, and that's forcing all that wire together. The wire is then going to go over the top of the round nose pliers. Switch from the top jaw to the bottom jaw. So I'm just doing a half little turn. And then I'm going to close up that wire. That's going to make an eye pin on this end, which I'm going to cut and close. So now on both ends of the bracelet, I have my eye pins. What I do want is my eye pins, when they're sitting, I want them to sit up and down. So I am going to turn them if you need to, so that way that they're facing up and down. So if you look at the bracelet, you can't see the loop. You can see the loops from this side. Now that I have the bracelet done, I'm going to actually do my clasp and my closure out of that extra wire that I have here. So to do that, I'm going to put my bead basically in the middle and kind of form around the sides. Taking my twisted wire again on the sides there, I'm going to wrap and coil about 3 or 4 times. Slide on one of my beads. Coil over top of the bead just so that it matches my bracelet, and coil the same amount of times on the other side. So now that I have the center amethyst bead wrapped and coiled on each side, all I'm going to do is pick up the Sharpie that I have, and it's that thin tip Sharpie, and I'm going to hold the wire right in the middle, and this is longer than it needs to be, but again, this is what was extra out of that 10 inches. If you have a bigger wrist, you might not have as much wire left. But this here is about 4 inches. You really only need about 2 inches. I'm going to take my wire right after that coil section and put my Sharpie down in its place. The wire is going to bend around the Sharpie towards the center of the bead. I'm going to move it a little bit further around my curve and come to the other side and do the same thing on the other side, bending the wire around that Sharpie curve to make my figure 8 or my S hook, depending on which style you want to call it. What I'm going to do then is trim down the ends with my wire cutters. Then I just want to make sure that they're not going to catch on anything. You can use around your wire tool or a file, or what I like to do is simply bend the wire with my needle nose pliers back against itself and kind of press it down. And give a little pinch, and that's going to flatten that out. Turn to the other side. I'm going to do the same thing. Turning the wire back upon itself and then flattening it out. Lastly, what I'm going to do is make that bead stop moving in its place. And to do that, what I'm going to do is go in with my wire, go into the wire right at the end and my needle nose pliers, and just kind of give a nice little pinch to pinch that wire down and in place on either side. One side I'll kind of close completely and the other side I'll have open a little bit. I'm going to slide that then into my bangle, And when I wear my bangle, that's going to be seen as my clasp. You can make this bigger or smaller by using knitting needles. You can use a mandrel. You can also just use the round nose plier if you want to make it really small. I like to have the clasp match the bracelet as you're working with it, so it gives it a nice, complete, and covered look. So hopefully you enjoy making the bangle. This twisted wire really does give it a great, elegant look, whether or not you're doing it in gold or silver. And you can play around with gauges as well. Again, this was 20 gauge and 18 gauge. I prefer to do 18 as the base, but if you have something that doesn't have big enough holes, you can also use 20 as the base. It just won't be as strong when you're going to clasp it and make it as well. You can also use a hammering block if you want and hammer down this figure 8 or this S hook, as well as the eye pins if you'd prefer to hammer down. That's another option for you. And the bangle will just sit right on your wrist. You can close it again with that figure 8 clasp, and you'll have it right there. Thanks a lot for watching. Hopefully you have fun making this twisted wire wrapped bangle. And if you get a chance, you can visit us online at thebeadco.com if you need materials. If you're near one of our stores, we'd love to see you. You can check out the locations page at potomacbeads.com. Come on in, say hi, take a class, gather some materials, show us what you've been working on. We'd love to see it. Thanks a lot for watching, and if you get a chance, check out the rest of our YouTube videos as well. Happy beading!